One of the thematics that we are engaging in, we are a climate and sustainability task force. So the major challenge that we are facing right now comes from the climate extremes, and that is affecting whatever the work that we are doing in the context of sustainability is affected by the climate change. So therefore, one of our major objectives of our task force is to create a pathway so the young practitioners in IEEE can engage in the conversation of climate change. That is why we are working with the UNFCCC. UNFCCC is the global process, who leads the global process on the climate talks that brings the member states to the climate negotiations table. So it is very important for us that we work with the most current conversation on climate change. So there is an agreement finally that was come into being in the year of 2015, because for decades the countries were struggling to come up with a standard or a solution method to address climate extremes and climate change related matters, like may it be adaptation to climate change, or mitigating emissions, or addressing loss and damage due to climate extreme events. There has to be a global standard. So the countries were struggling for a long time to come up with a solution for this. So finally in 2015, countries finally managed to come up with a set of rules and guidelines that they can work together, which is called the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. So this agreement provides allocations for different items like climate change education, climate change technology, loss and damage funding. So all these different items are described in this agreement, and they provide help for different countries, especially the developing countries who are suffering a lot. We saw recent floods in the North African region, which some of the time the whole villages and towns are wiped off from extreme precipitation events. So these are the kinds of climate events that we need solutions for, in preparing ourselves and also responding to. So the climate agreement can provide allocations for these extreme events and protect the communities to a certain extent. So that is why the climate agreement is important. So it has been working since 2015, and there has been certain amendments and changes to climate agreement as well. So to get back into the real problem, so the climate is changing at a certain extent in a rapid rate, and the average temperatures of the global environment is rising. And the concern here is the climates are shifting. So when some place is extremely warm, another place is extremely cold at the same time. This has been observed in this summer, where usually now Europe goes through heat waves every year, which hasn't happened before. And in Europe, in certain areas, or even in northern hemisphere, a lot of places are no longer getting snow. So and the extent of glaciers are decreasing in an alarming rate as well. Sometimes you might not feel these aspects since the climate is shifting all the time, but on an average level, it's important to keep monitoring what's going on. So that is what is being done by monitoring the average temperature of the world and reporting that as a measure of climate shift. So what we have observed in the last 10 years or so is that there's a rapid increase of global average temperature, and this increase is shifting the extreme climate events. So certain areas that didn't get extreme climate, like flooding, is happening right now. So that is the risk, because we never know. Even if you know that your hometown is safe, it might no longer be. So that is why the Paris Agreement is there, that even if you don't know if an extreme climate would happen in your local area, there should be pre-allocations for different countries, especially for the developing countries, that if a climate extreme event happens in a place that it wasn't planned to, there is protection for communities for recover, right? So this is the importance of understanding the global climate, and also have a mechanism to give solutions after an extreme damage happens. So we have to be prepared. So all this effort is all about being prepared, because you don't really feel in your day-to-day life these things could happen. So that is why we are working closely with the United Nations and other member states to try to engage our young professionals in IEEE even in these processes, because IEEE young professionals are very smart, to be honest, and they are very good in engineering, and they understand these concepts very easily than anyone else. So that is why we have to have an understanding of these numbers, and what does 1.5 Celsius increase means against what 2 Celsius increase means, and what would happen to the world if the average temperature increases by 4. Though these concepts should be really understood. What are the different scenarios that could happen? That is a good training for IEEE young professionals, to be honest, to understand these extremes and to be part of this process. So that is why we are trying to have this established process on climate and sustainability within the IEEE young professionals. So jumping ahead, yeah, so a little bit more about Paris Agreement and how we can sort of engage as young practitioners. Is there a place for us in the climate agreement, and how can we help? Like we can't always be talking about the problem. We can always say, oh my God, the climate change is happening, but it's not our job to always state the problem and do nothing, right? We have to do something. So that is what we are trying to do, to find that place where we can do something. So the Paris Agreement, the objective is to limit, overall objective is to limit the average global temperature below 2 degrees C increase. So that means that a lot of member countries all over the world have to work together to, especially the high emitting countries like United States, where I am at, and China and other countries, Brazil. All these countries have to commit to reduce emissions from their industrial activities and economic activities, and then that to drive the global temperature increase to slow down. And then we have to add other layers of solutions to safeguard the communities against the damage that has been already been done. So that is why we are talking about resilience. So we have to create certain level of resilience to climate impacts, whether may be infrastructure. So we have to protect the grid, right? IEEE is very much involved in the grid formation and grid transformation. And so that we have to ensure that the grids are resilient and against the climate extremes, and also grids can be transformed to safeguard the populations against the climate extremes. So the enhancing resilience is one of the objectives of the Paris Agreement. And then the financial flows. So the developing countries are really struggling to recover from extreme climate events, extreme heat waves, flooding, and other climate events like agricultural impacts. So the harvest is not so good so far, not as good as before. So these are small impacts, right? So the financial flows around the world. So the developed countries should support developing countries and least developed countries. So it's really important to keep an eye on how much finances go into the supporting climate change related adverse effects, and how to safeguard communities. So that is why the Paris Agreement is there, to limit the temperature, to enhance resilience, and also align financial flows. So I mean, these, as you can see, yes, Omar.
Just a reminder that we only have now 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll jump into sustainable thinking very soon. So we just wanted to sort of highlight the importance of the Paris Agreement, and how. Let me jump ahead a little bit, and this is. So yeah, so just wanted to sort of highlight how important Paris Agreement is and how the member countries also can contribute. So especially for the IEEE context, we can contribute from the technology aspect, so technical aspects and the capacity building aspect. That is our strength. So that is why we should be part of the climate change processes, and also to communicate what we found out, how we can support, we can act in the national context. So nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, are how the countries commit for climate and how they communicate their commitments on climate change. So as IEEE members from different countries, we can sort of support or campaign to support to include certain modifications for NDCs, so that we include our voices in the climate change commitment. So that is what how we can help to change the conversation around climate. So I won't go in details at the moment on NDCs. I will jump a little bit ahead. Yeah, role of IEEE. Yeah, so where IEEE can help is mainly on the technology side. So there is an article specifically on technology in the Paris Agreement. So that talks about the technology solutions, development of technical solutions, and how to communicate those to the member countries and support member countries increase their resilience, right? So that is where the where IEEE can be really influential. So whatever the solutions that you have in the context of climate, you can bring this, create awareness and communicate these solutions to the climate process, and try to engage those solutions in the broader context. So this is what we are trying to facilitate from our task force as well. We are in conversation with the UNFCCC. We met them last week, and we are trying to engage more and more technological solutions in their sessions, so we can really communicate what solutions IEEE and professionals can provide in the context of climate and sustainability. So jumping into from my last conversation, like we were talking about the climate change, but climate change is not happening on its own, right? So the lack of sustainability that has been there in the world is causing climate change, and then climate change in return impacts the sustainable development. So these are all interlinked and interconnected issues in the world. So when we are trying to start with design thinking, we have to understand climate change in the beginning, and see what it has done to the communities. And then we have to jump into the sustainability process. So that is what's going to be part of my discussion as well. So sustainable thinking is sort of bringing ideas into life, but at the same time understanding your environment and what has happened before and doing something about it. So there is a lot of conceptual processes involved, but it's not that complicated, to be honest. So first thing is that we understand an issue and empathize with it, and then we define a certain solution, right? We come up with a not the perfect solution, but some solution that would fit to address the problem that you have, because always you have to understand what the problem that you are addressing is. Clearly define what you want to address. That is very important at the very beginning. Even for the starting of the climate and sustainability task force, we were trying to understand what is the current problem. The problem we identified is that IEEE young professionals are not adequately connected to the global processes in the most current manner. So we understood that problem, and we defined the concept of the task force. It's not the perfect solution, but it's some solution that we can work on providing a solution. So that is part of the defining. After empathizing, we define, and then we go into ideating session, like what can we do as part of this solution? What are the strengths and what are the weaknesses that we have, and what we can deliver? So we can have, so for a number of things we can as action items that we can deliver. And that is what I went through in my slides. The first slide said what we deliver, right? We deliver statements, we delivered our position papers, we deliver trainings, we delivered engagements, we deliver partnerships. So these are the things that we ideated at the beginning as a part of the solution. So we defined what is the solution path, and then we ideated certain steps that we can take as the part of the solution. And then we created the prototype of our task force. I'm talking in the context of the task force because it's simple, because we went from empathizing to defining and then ideating, and then we created the prototype, and then we tested it in the first few months of our task force. From December to February, we tested several things, tested partnerships, tested trainings, and that's when we realized, oh, we can do something. We are in a position to make an impact. So this is the pathway of bringing ideas to life, right? In summary, I'll go back. Try to empathize with the problem, identify your problem clearly, and then define a certain solution that is not perfect, but then identify what are the sub-thematics or subtopics or sub-items you can deliver, ideate that, and then create a prototype of the solution, and then test it and come back to the it's a circle. So if it is not working out, you come back and define again, and likewise you go in these steps to deliver idea to a product, right? So this can be applied for a commercial product as well. At the same time, I made the task force our example because that was in my mind. But yeah, so even for a commercial product, you have to apply the same approach. But then again, what is it's no longer again isolated process. We have to sort of think about the sustainability in the global context. That is why there are supporting mechanisms, right? More often, people don't really pay attention to the standards globally accepted, but being IEEE, we work closely with standards. So we are very attentive to standards. So if another entity presents a standard, we always try to engage with that with sort of a prior understanding. So this is same for the sustainable development. So I think many of you have heard about sustainable development goals, but I don't know whether you have really engaged in the concept of sustainable development goals. But it's important that we talk about sustainable development goals in the context of design thinking, because it helps us to sort of think through many important factors that contribute to a certain solution. So I'm presenting here the sustainable development definition that you can take it into your mind: meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's all about preserving for the future and being so conscious about the current level of consumption. So that is the main message here. But what is the importance of sustainable development goals? It's not just a set of colored boxes, right? Each of them has a certain objective and a certain target and certain deliverables. So this is important for young people because we have to understand what are the important parameters that we should think about when we are thinking of designing or creating a product, because there are many factors. And what happened with sustainable development goals is that a lot of leaders from many countries and advisors, scientists, they came together to discuss what are the different categories of issues that the world is facing. So they tried to divide it as much as possible, and finally identified 17 different items that you should be concerned about when you are thinking in a designing mindset or presenting a product or any process, right? So there's an objective to reduce poverty. Then we have to think of the food. We have to think of the healthcare, education, gender, water, energy, labor, industry, inequalities or balance, and sustainability of cities and communities, and consumption, climate change, water, and life below the water, and then life on land, and justice, and at the end, the partnerships. So these 17 items are really important to integrate to your design. Your design or whatever your product, it might not involve all of them, but you have to keep in mind these items as important aspects when you are thinking about designing. So the most important part of this sustainable development goals are that they are not separate. Even if I stated them one by one, they are all interlinked. So this is why each of these aspects of sustainable development will affect your design. When you're thinking of designing a product, each of these items will have some impact on your product, so that you have to think, oh, how do I contribute to elevating poverty? How do I contribute to the food systems? How do I contribute to the health of the world population? Whatever the product is, there's a small item involved in affecting each of these 17 development goals. So that is why you have to think of in that way, that what is the impact you make in each of these items through your product or the process. So that will create a very good understanding to communicate your product into the world. So you can interpret it in a way, oh, this is my product, this is my thinking, and it will affect the global solutions in a certain way. So everything is interconnected. So you have to think of, I think in this context, when you are designing and approaching a design. So that is what I'm trying to point out. And then we have the global issues, like cross-cutting big issues at the moment. What you to think about? Climate change, I already talked about, because any design or any product will have an impact on how the climate is impacted, whether it will be emissions, whether it will be reducing or increasing the resilience of the communities against climate, and also how you can support the loss and damage side of things as well. So the climate crisis becomes an important cross-cutting issue, global challenge, and an opportunity as well. Your product could be helping out the climate crisis in a certain way, creating a cleaner air in your community, or support resilience against climate, especially in the construction sector, energy solutions, right? These are all contributing to solving the climate crisis. So these climate crisis can be viewed as a cross-cutting challenge. And then the citizens, the communities, each design that you make, the design approach should serve the community around you and globally. So you have to keep the community in mind, because vulnerable communities don't have a solution. They have to live in their in the space defined for them. So you can't put them at risk by a solution that you propose. So you have to always keep the communities in mind. And then the ecosystems, environment is always important. This has been taught for everyone from the very young age, but we have to keep a track on the environmental footprint, and every solution that you propose should be environmentally conscious as much as possible, and you have to have an understanding of environmental impact that you are making. And then food and agricultural systems are also important. So every solution that you come up can impact the global consumption sectors. So this is also a vital sector that has been accepted as a global challenge. So I'm just trying to point out some cross-cutting important challenges and how they should be prioritized in the design thinking. So energy becomes one of the most important factors. Energy systems are transforming at the moment, and you are involving in the design in a time that energy systems are going through a transformation. There's a lot of conversation on energy storage and decentralized energy solutions. So these will impact any design or process significantly. So these are some of the few aspects that are very, very, in addition to the sustainable development goals, these are the global challenges and opportunities that you should keep in mind when you are thinking of designing and process thinking. Yeah, so at the conclusion, not at the conclusion as such, but it's at the end of the day, it should be a guided approach that you use for the designs, and it should be a systems approach. So even sustainable development goals that I mentioned are proposing this systems approach. Just don't think in isolation. Try to have a guidance framework for you when you are thinking of a design. So always have, it doesn't really mean you have to follow the sustainable development goals to a point, but it's a background framework that you should have in mind, so that it helps your design to become optimal. So have these. I can provide you the slides as well to go through them and understand, but also always think in a systemic approach when you are thinking about the solution, like your vision and the incorporation of sustainable development goals and their objectives in your design, and then the assessment of getting the required data, and thinking about the optimum solution, and sort of try to always address a gap that you identify, and that was mentioned earlier as well in my first slide. And then you should definitely do a systems mapping, how each of you, how your design would impact the interlinkages that I talked about in the context of sustainable development, and then identify different scenarios of application, the impacts that it would have, and how they evaluate the results from the testing stage, and try to evaluate what are the impacts that the product would be making. So, and then after evaluating those impacts, you can decide on implementation, how optimum is your product in the context of systems approach. So then you go to the final segment of implementing, and then try to sort of implement it in a manner it is scalable. So scalability is also becoming an important factor, that it's not catering a narrow scope of community, but it can be scaled to a wider audience without making negative impacts on the interlinkages that we talked about.